Hello and welcome to the Effortless Swimming podcast. This week we are featuring some of the best bits from 2024. We had dozens of different guests on and we've picked out what we think are some of the highlights, some of the best bits from some of those episodes. So it's like a highlights reel for 2024. And if you have listened to this show once or 100 times, if you haven't left us a review in the Apple App Store or on Spotify, it would mean a lot to me if you could do that. It helps us out and helps us get in front of more people. I'm looking forward to 2025. We've got some big plans for the podcast, our YouTube channel, and then also the clinics and the camps that we run. So if you haven't joined us on any of those things and you'd like to, you can head to effortlessswimming.com. If you're in Sydney, we've added a bunch of more clinic dates for freestyle and fly, back and breast through late December and early January. So if you are in Sydney at that time, come and check us out there. And you can find that on our website as well at effortlessswimming.com. Let's get into this week's episode, highlights from 2024. Our first guest is James Lawrence, who completed 101 Ironman events in 101 days.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with the distractions of social media. It's just drawing all of our attention. And it's funny, I saw a hilarious thing online the other day where someone was like, mindfulness. We're now in a society and a time where we have to intentionally seek out and be mindfulness, meaning like inside of our own thoughts and contemplating and meditation. But I'm turning 48 and the person doing the video was about the same age, and they were like, back in our day that was like going to the bathroom. Like you were mindfulness. It was like walking outside. It was like I had to get from point A to point B. Like there wasn't anything to really distract us, and so we were mindfulness all the time. And the word didn't even exist back then, is because normal life in society, as a byproduct of it, you had to become mindfulness. There was so many opportunities and moments where you're just like sitting by yourself in your thoughts, being mindful of who you are, what you're doing, dreaming. Like I talk about this from stage, like as a society, we have forgotten how to dream because we're so busy fixated on what other people are doing and we're experiencing life through them that like we've stopped dreaming.
Next up is Sharon Van Rouwendaal. This was recorded before she won gold at the Olympics in the 10-kilometer open water event.
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes in a race, I don't have the guts to put the kick beat in because if you didn't use them a lot, sometimes they're stiff, and then just my feeling says you're gonna lactate so much. So I'm training on it. I switched to Germany, and I have a very good kick because I've also kicked in France with the shoulder injuries. I did kick sets and other kick sets. So my kick is really good, and I have still those sort of backstroke legs that are really strong. And so we're like, well, why are you not using it? And I said, yeah, but when I learned swimming, it was like this dance. I went the crossover kick. It's my dance. It's my momentum. How do you want to do like a normal six kick? So when I do the normal six kick, I'm like in slow motion, and I still don't have the rhythm. I can't find the momentum. It's just something I can't find. But when I do the speed now, there's this sort of, it feels like a sort of motor behind that really kicks. So I'm super fast in sprints. And also when I build it, I can do the crossover and then I build it to a six kick. But in the race, still after long distance, because I can lactate on it, it's still very hard to put the six kick. But I have a very strong kick. Even in Doha now, you can see that there is a strong kick in it. Just sometimes there is a six kick, sometimes not. But I think I've worked a lot on my speed and on that kick. So that made me very strong. On the 5K, you can see that there's very long strokes and almost looks like straight arms. But there is a lot of power there in the last 200 meters of that race. And that's where I worked on for the last 3 years to get that also momentum with the kick and the power in the arms, and then passing the competitors.
Next up is Hollie Buerckner, who did her master's in shoulder injuries for swimming. What other kinds of exercises would you often prescribe people just to develop that control through those different shoulder movements?
Yeah, so we've got another one, and it's called like the YTA. So you're laying in a prone position, so laying flat, straight down, facing the ground, and then you've got your thumbs like this, and you're gonna go up into a Y like that, and you lift. So it's kind of squeezing the scapulas together, and you're lifting your arms up into the air about 10 reps. And you go into the same thing with your thumbs out, and you go into a T position, and you lift up, and you're squeezing your scaps together, and then you go down into an A. So your arms are beside you, maybe this far away from, or about this far away from like the middle of you, and you're doing that same kind of pulse, and you do it 10 times. So you're going to go in and out, a fair few times, just to really strengthen those scaps and to get them kind of moving in the right position. So that's another great one that you can do before you then hop in the pool, so that you've got that kind of mind muscle connection to those scapulas. Because a lot of the time with swimming, it's when you become a lazy swimmer that your shoulder starts to hurt. You kind of stop thinking about how your arm's moving, stop thinking about if you're pulling your scapulas together, maybe you're hunching over in the water, or you're just throwing the arms into the water instead of kind of placing them in the water. And then that's when a lot of injuries can start to occur, because you start to compromise. Instead of using your muscles, you kind of start to use the joint.
Next up is Jarrod Briffa. I've done some work with Jarrod on breathing and breath control. He's a free diver and free dive instructor. And on this episode, we talked about how swimmers can utilize some of those techniques to their advantage. Now, what about some exercises, either on dry land or exercises in the pool, that would help swimmers feel like they can breathe more effectively, whether that's not needing to breathe as much, or just feeling like they're more relaxed and more comfortable in the water? What are some of those things that we can do as swimmers?
Yeah, I think at first, like, it depends on your level, right? So like if you're starting at a level like, let's say like that beginner level with CO2 tolerance, where maybe the BOLT score is like 15 seconds or less. Okay, so do the BOLT test. What did you get? Okay, 15 seconds or less. Someone in this range, they're going to become breathless very quickly. So I would start off with like awareness of the breath. So trying to make sure that when they are breathing, they're getting a full breath in, and also they're getting a full breath out. And just being aware of how often they're breathing. Okay, so trying to like make it more rhythmic and getting more familiar with, like, are they breathing every 2 strokes? Are they breathing every 3 strokes? That sort of stuff. And then definitely like trying to focus on nasal breathing when they're at the wall. So whenever they come to the wall, trying to focus on nasal breathing for the recovery. This is a really good one for beginners and people that are having trouble with this stuff. This is going to, like, during the swim, you will have increased the CO2. And if you breathe through your nose at the wall, you're going to maintain that higher level of CO2 for longer. And this is going to help to build up your tolerance to it. And then, like, any sort of kicking drills that they do that with your face in the water. So have your face in the water, you'll be on breath hold for a bit, and then take breaths when you need to take breaths. But try not to do your kicking drills with the face out of the water. So that would be a really good way to incorporate those in for beginners.
Next up is Dan Eisenhardt, the CEO of Form Goggles.
You can only focus on what you can control, then try and be inspired by something that you think, is this a training method that you can also adopt, right? Maybe tweak it. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, going forward, believing in yourself, of course, staying humble and open to input and feedback. But, nothing gets done unless you sort of act with conviction, right? You just keep overthinking stuff. And the best thing to test whether you have a good idea or not is to actually go and do it. And then just start low ambitions. And then you can actually always add onto it with customer feedback, right? And when it comes to products, of course, some products are hard to get to that minimal viable product level, right? Like our product took years and years to develop, but we didn't go out and launch a product that had all the features that we have today, right? Even though back then we had envisioned most of them, because we knew, okay, let's start with something that we know is easy to communicate and measure and message around, and then we can go from there based on customer feedback.
Next up is Dean Summers, who swam 95.6 kilometres from Newcastle to Sydney.
The articles that was written about the swim, had 10 plus hours where dark sky, it's just you've got the Milky Way out there, the bioluminescence as well. What was the nighttime swim experience like?
Well, for the previous 2 or 3 years, I live on Coogee, so at night you can see the sea, you can hear it. I've been, dreading's not the right word, but I've been a little anxious about a whole night swimming out in the ocean because it's past the horizon from where I live. And I know soon I'm going to be out there in the water on my own with a kayaker, and it's going to be a tough night. I thought maybe I'll get a full moon so I can see things, but the full moon wasn't there. There was only what's called a thumbnail moon, just a tiny slither of moon, but not enough to give any light. The sun was going down. The water was okay. It was just a little bit of chop and a big lazy rolling swell, so that was quite okay. The kayakers were set. We're all ready for the night time. I'd been in the water already for 12 hours, but I wasn't feeling tired. I was feeling good. Okay, this is the next stage, and I'm ready for it. Let's do it. So the sun goes down behind the mountains. I can see way off in the distance to the land side. And it was getting darker in the water, but then all of a sudden night fell and the water just switched to black, just completely black. Okay, I'm ready to go. The kayak's next to me, and I'm looking up and I can see the Milky Way starting to shine. And it was just sort of at 9 o'clock, I suppose you'd say, 9 o'clock. And it looked beautiful, but really, really bright. So bright you could read a book off, I'd say. There were no other lights around me. We designed it in the back of the kayaks. We just put this tiny little red glowing light in the well of the kayak. So there was no direct light. It was just a loom, and that's what I could follow. The big boat, the pilot boat, was quite a way off, maybe half a kilometre away, so that had no ambient light to it at all. So it was just essentially me in the black ocean with a night sky at night. Beautiful. And as this Milky Way started to shine, all the stars started to come out too, like little suns, and so bright, so clear. I put my hand in the water soon after it got black, and I was so happy to see bioluminescence. And I don't know if you swam with them, but when your fingers go, it's like shooting little stars out the end of your fingers. It lights up these little pingy lights, and they're just all around you. Then your other arm goes in, same happens there, and you create a little cloud of stars that just gently, as you move through the water, ping into your goggles and explode gently into your goggles in this beautiful bioluminescence colour of blue and green. And so you've got the Milky Way up here, you've got the stars that seem to be so low you could almost reach out and touch them, and underneath you've got the bioluminescence giving a same sort of look as stars. So no horizon, too dark for that, but and there's nothing on the horizon. All you can see is stars all around you. It was the most beautiful, beautiful night.
This episode is brought to you by Pillar Performance. Our new sponsors, Pillar, are a sports micronutrition company. And the easiest way to describe it is that while hydration and carbohydrates products will take you through to touch the wall as fast as possible, Pillar's mission is to get swimmers to the starting blocks in the best condition over and over again. I recently started taking Pillar Triple Magnesium after a friend had recommended it, and it's been a game changer for my sleep and recovery. I take 1 scoop 30 minutes before bed each night. In the same way that you might start your day with a coffee, I finish it up with the magnesium and recover better for tomorrow's session in the pool. Pillar Performance is used by some of the biggest names in swimming and triathlon, including Zach Stubblety Cook, Jan Frodeno, Ben Canute, Ash Gentle, Taylor Nibb, amongst a host of other well-known swimmers and triathletes. Where Pillar differs from other micronutrition you may have taken before is both the quality of the types of magnesium and the tangible results that I see on my Garmin each morning. If you'd like to try Pillar today, head to pillarperformance.shop and enter code EFFORTLESS for 15% off. That's EFFORTLESS for 15% off all first-time purchases, or for anyone in North America, enter the same code at thefeed.com. Next is Tracey Baumann, who we've had on the podcast multiple times, and she is a swim technique expert. She has huge background and history in studying and teaching freestyle technique, and I think this is probably one of the most popular episodes that we had throughout the year. I've used some similar sort of cues. I talk about I have called it an open recovery compared to a closed recovery, where we're thinking like closed armpit. We need open underarms really over the water. We need open underarms under the water at the front as well, and that in terms of the momentum that you get over the water, your arm weighs, I don't know, a couple of kilos, and then when you're swinging it around over the top, you can really get good momentum over the water and carry that through. It's that free speed. And when you see someone who's not getting it, who throwing themselves off balance and they're coming way behind their body, you really notice it, and it does impact how well they flow in the water. So it's it is. If you get it right, you notice a big difference. And I've tried to turn that thought of a high elbow recovery into like the point that's high. It's like, I think if the elbow is pointing mostly to the sky as you come through in that middle part, okay, that's what I'd think of as a classic high elbow recovery. But certainly not coming literally high over the water with it. Next up is Nick Jankovskis from Mets Performance.
The things we learn from elite athletes are useful. It's because they're the best in the world, and we're finding ways to improve them. If those little things improve them, there's probably parts of that we can take and implement to the newbie, who is then going to get significantly better as a result. It's not going to turn you into a pro overnight. And some of the really refined stuff, probably still we go, okay, we might not use some of that because that's a bit advanced or complex, particularly on the training side of things. I'm not going to ask a brand new athlete to go and do 30 seconds at 500 watts on a bike, straight out the gate. You're probably going to work our way to that. But some of the basic stuff is just keep in a zone 2. You keep in a zone 2 that is actually your zone 2, not just one that Garmin told you. It's we actually assessed it, and here's the marker and the threshold. Well, you go and implement that for 3 months, you're going to be significantly better off. So that is kind of an overall principle, is the way I approach it. It's no real one thing. It's just embracing the fact that sports science is far bigger than just Olympic level, world championship type stuff. It's it plays a big role there, but what we can learn from those people is just as important to then apply to someone who's getting into it for the first time. Because if you can train a little bit more effectively, I can guarantee you, if you're an amateur who's got to work a 9 to 5 and you go, I can't do 300 Ks a week like a professional marathon runner can, but I can do 50 Ks a week. Well, how do we make that 50 Ks as effective as possible so that you can still rock up to work and not be exhausted, and then get home and see your kids and not be exhausted? There's other factors at play. Best in the world, sometimes all they have to worry about is wake up, train, eat, sleep, go again. But that's where the sports science side just helps dial it in a little bit. You don't have to go overkill, but it's just taking those little bits and just really trying to learn the little tips and tricks that'll make you significantly better at your level, with the realistic expectation. It's okay, we can probably gain a fair bit out of this, but it's not going to turn me into a pro athlete, and I don't have to be a pro athlete to go and do it. But all I'm trying to do is find ways to get me better.
Next up is Jaimie Fuller from EO Labs, who designed and developed the Swim Better handsets, which measure your force and direction.
Most hand paths I see go out, come in, and then go straight back. Your first move is in and then out a little bit, so you're coming in and then pushing back from here. But nothing stands out here, and there's no. That's the other thing, mate, that everybody says to me is, "Oh, can you give me Kyle Chalmers' hand path and I'll just copy that?" It doesn't work that way, right? I mean, we all need to find our own hand path, and whilst at a very surface level, you might think, well, if I've just got to have my hand pushing back, I just need it to be straight. That's not the answer either, because it's about how we switch on our muscles, and the best place for our arm to go and our hand to move in order to be able to switch on the muscles in the shoulder and the arm and down on the lats. That's what gives us our power and drive. And that, combined with the ability to hold that water and drive the body forward, that's the holy grail.
Next up is marathon swimmer and coach Craig Lewin. I was going to ask, in terms of the marathon swimming, is an important factor there? Is it just being able to hold your stroke rate, hold your tempo, aside from when you need to pick it up? Is that something that's you'd sort of look at a little bit more rather than stroke length, which obviously we can't measure in the open water, but is it tempo?
Yeah, I mean, stroke rate's pretty important. You'll see a lot of swimmers will have their crew with whiteboards, and one of the numbers they're writing down is stroke rate. I think it's also a number that observers for colder swims we'll often watch, because if it drops below, if it's dropping rapidly and the swimmer can't pick it up, it's a sign of hypothermia and it might be time to call a swim. But stroke rate is one, because it's that consistent motion throughout the swim, mainly because if you start getting stretched out too much or you start revving up and you're slipping, if you're in salt water, it's less dense than a pool, it's more aerated, so you need the turnover, because even if you had the same stroke rate in a pool or open water, you're not going to go as far with every pull in the open water, because it's less dense water, because it's aerated, because there's chop and swell. So that's why the stroke rate does tend to matter. But everyone's different. Like you'll see people like Adam Walker. I don't know if you've ever talked to him, but he's an Ocean 7 swimmer, and he has probably one of the longest strokes I've seen, and it works. So like everyone's different, but for average people, it's generally the stroke, keeping that tempo throughout and that consistency throughout is going to be a really important factor in their success.
Next up is Sharon Van Rouwendaal and Moesha Johnson, who got first and second at the Paris Olympics in the 10-kilometer open water swim.
I think for me, it's going to be very different to Sharon, because I was the underdog. I was the dark horse. I wasn't in any predictions whatsoever. Like I believed in myself that I could do it, but I am still developing my open water experience. So, I just had to, I had to get an individual podium, and I didn't know whether it would be this year or in the years to come, but that was my goal. But yeah, definitely this race, like Sharon said, it was, I enjoyed it because we were battling the conditions of the course, the environment, not the pack of girls around us. So you actually just got to put your training on display, in my opinion. And I think that was how it showed in the end. It was your training, tactical, your endurance, your speed, all the things that Sharon mentioned, and you didn't have the big pack of girls that that were holding or pulling you back or bumping into each other. And yeah, so I think it was definitely a race that I to get my first international medal individually at an Olympics, it was unbelievable. And obviously with Australia being on such a different time zone, the amount of public back home who actually got the chance to watch my sport, sometimes it's a bit of an underrated sport, and it's just been fantastic, the support and the messages, and just even the people still today who are coming up to me and just talking about the iconic swim that I did. And I think it's definitely been a bit of a journey. I've done a bit of an alternative route as an Australian swimmer to get here. It was definitely a fantastic feeling on that finishing line. I've actually done it. My big decisions that might have been debated at the time, they've paid off. So for me, it was I only had the pressure that I put on myself going into that race. I didn't have anyone else's pressure. I don't think even the commentary knew who I was until halfway through the race. I think they didn't know what to say. My mum just kept saying, I think they handed him notes on you halfway through the race, because suddenly all these facts came out, So
Yeah.
I had a very different probably thing to what Sharon's going to explain.
Next up is Bek Keat, who is a former professional triathlete and now triathlon coach.
Whatever works is what happens under the water. You got to get it in the right spot. What happens under the water is so important. That's where I was obsessed with your videos, because I try to get videos of my athletes and I don't have an underwater camera. I was like, watch this guy, because this is everything. The catch is everything. And they look at it and they're like, can't keep my elbow up. What's the thing? And I make them watch your videos, because what's happening under the water is way more important than over it. It can look yucky above the water, but it has to be a strong pull through, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I've got a similar approach where it doesn't matter what's happening over the water as long as that's not impacting you under the water in a negative way. So it can be quite scrappy over the top. And I did a season of triathlon. I did it for 1 year just as a bucket list to do an Ironman. And
I didn't know that. What did you do? Which one?
Well, I was booked in for Melbourne Ironman, and that was the year that they cancelled it. So I travelled over to Taupo and did it there instead.
That's a hard to do.
Yeah, I'm glad I did it though, because the swim was mass start, flat conditions in a lake, and I had.
What time did you go? 49 or 48 or something?
47:01. I did.
Oh my god! Is that the record? That's insane.
Next up is Sandra Harrell, who has a background in swim-specific strength.
And, a general guideline that I tell all of my athletes and my clients is that, like, you don't see there is not any notable strength gains until about 6 to 8 weeks of consistent strength training. And consistent strength training would mean you're lifting at least twice a week, not even once a week. So if you're just lifting once a week, the amount of work required to see progress is going to take probably double the time, right? You're just not breaking down muscle at a consistent and steady enough pace to see change quick enough. But if you're lifting at least twice a week to maybe even 3 times a week, you're going to see those gains a lot quicker. And so typically I tell my athletes, who are consistent, give yourself about 8 weeks, give yourself 2 months, okay, of being consistent, stick to it, keep progressing. And then you're going to really see notable performance differences after that, especially when you are consistent with it. Because the first, 1 to 2 months of lifting, a lot of that is just, tearing down your muscles. You're just super sore, super stiff all the time, especially if you haven't lifted in some time, right? And so that's, so that's the thing. People think that, oh, I lift, working out means I'm building muscle. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You work out and you actually break down muscle. That's why you get sore. You get micro tears in your muscles. So the more you train, the harder you train, the more you're breaking down muscles. You're in more of like a catabolic state. And so that's where nutrition comes in, right? Nutrition is the thing that helps build muscle. It puts you in an anabolic state. And that is what helps you rebuild your muscle and helps with muscle protein synthesis, is really making sure you're eating enough protein for your particular physique, for your body weight.
Next up is New Zealand swimmer and coach Laura Quilter.
How would you describe, say, a 50 sprint technique to someone? What are those things that you're feeling for or trying to achieve when you are sprinting?
It's like calculated chaos in a weird way. So you need to be performing with the most amount of aggression and power that you can, but it has to be funneled through an effective mechanics. And I think it was Cameron McAvoy, he talks about the fact that swimming's a cyclical sport. And basically, as long as you get that one cycle correct, all you have to do is replicate that for 20 to 30 seconds. So when I started to change my stroke, primarily it was focused on my hips staying a little bit more level in the water and a lot more rotation through the upper body and the shoulders. I did notice that in the early stages, I've got quite limited thoracic mobility, and that kind of felt like I was jammed up a bit. So I did have to spend a bit of time on mobility as well to actually even swim like that. And with the sprint style, pulling a lot straighter under the water was a new concept to me, and that comes with a whole lot of other challenges. I wouldn't go tell most people to swim a 50 style because it does put so much more pressure on the shoulder, which really emphasised the need to get a lot stronger in the gym. So the 3 key aspects that I did start to train with, I was using resistance training a lot more than I had formerly. So that was, your parachutes, fins and socks, which I'd never use. I really like drag socks, actually, more than the parachute. I actually really detest the parachute. So a lot more resistance training, a lot more work on the dive mechanics, and then just that, still hips with a big kick and the power coming through the shoulders.
And with the socks, so the drag socks, for people listening, it's not just normal socks. These are like special sort of swimming.
Next up is Kat Matthews, who got second at the Ironman World Championships in Nice this year.
And I think again, like I've one of the biggest things I've learned this year, this is me summarizing my waffly story, is that I really love learning like the sort of psychology from books and then trying to sort of, implement it in myself, I guess. So yeah, the book itself was called The Reality Slap from Russ Harris. It was like, he also wrote The Happiness Trap, which I think I tried to read and I was like not interested in. It's quite a big seller though. Whereas The Reality Slap it's about radical acceptance. And again, just like things like that, like this, I feel like is a self-development thing that I actually find really sort of fascinating, which is a bit sad. And then another book I was reading at the time was called Perform Under Pressure by Kerry Evans. So again, like reading them both or listening to one and reading one was actually really nice to sort of, you don't just get obsessed with one sort of fad like thought processing. You can see a bigger picture perhaps and like take different elements of it. So yeah, I think that's something that I've learned as a sort of, again, as like whole, is like that ability to cope with unexpected problems, which sounds mad that it took a calf injury after the big accident. And I guess like being more calm in situations that are out of my control. So for example, in Nice, like having the cramping issues, looking back on it, I actually realized that, it was quite good that I was able to be like, okay, I'm cramping. What can I do about it? Remove myself, look at it from the outside, assess the situation. And I think like you just sort of do that without realizing, but those are the processing steps that these books sort of actually go through. And I wonder whether I learned that from reading, for example, like, okay, so this is either my muscles aren't strong enough or, simple things, but when you're under pressure, the cognition is often much harder to deal with. And then obviously the emotion of it all. So took on some fuel, did a bit of walking, did what I could, just cracked on. So I think that's a big sort of lesson, that ability to deal with mishaps.
And next up is Ryan Evernden, who worked very closely with Andy Donaldson in terms of his strength training. And Ryan teaches and coaches swim-specific strength in Perth.
And it's up to us as this S&C provider to manage their load so they're not going into the next session sore. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to get better from what you recover from. This is, I'm an S&C provider who works with swimmers. My job is to make sure they can swim in the water to the best of their ability every time they get in the water. My job is not to kick people in the butt and make them sore for weeks. In my own way of trying to fulfill my own needs as an S&C coach and make myself feel relevant. My job is to make sure that these guys get in the water, do and can continue to perform in the water. Yes, sometimes they're going to get sore, and that does happen, but that's not the goal. I don't want anyone to be sore. We have a rule with my gym program. If they're sore, if they do a session and they're sore, they've got to tell us, because we don't want it to happen twice. We want to just make sure that they're doing what they can and they're maximizing every swim session they can do. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. One might be, okay, the volume isn't very high, the intensity wasn't very high. So what did you do in terms of recovery? Like, how's your nutrition? What's your sleep like? Did you hydrate effectively? Do we need to bring in some recovery aids just to help speed up that process for you? Or is this going to just be something that we're going to have to take, okay, this happened this week, we'll make a quick adjustment for your second session in the week, and then we'll come back to that session at same load and see what happens, because it might have just been, it's a lot of new stuff in the program, the adaptation process was, your body just freaked out a bit. But you've got to also go, okay, well, we don't want that to happen too often, because then they've had two crap sessions that week or in 2 weeks, and I don't really want that. I want people feeling fresh, because at the end of the day, they need to swim fast in the water to get faster in the water. They don't need to lift heavy in the gym to get fast in the water necessarily. It does help though.
Gotcha. So the reason you don't want them coming or leaving a gym session sore is because it's obviously going to impact their performance in the pool. And if you're doing that too much, you're just not going to get the gains from the swim.
Well, what's the risk reward ratio on that, if that makes sense? Like, if I'm belting someone in the gym, twice a week, and they're turning up after every session they have with me to their next session in the water, and they're sore, they're going to have a crap session, at least twice a week. If they get 48 hours of DOMs, they're going to have maybe 3 crap sessions, what ends up 6 crap sessions a week. But maybe they only had 1 good session that week. They're probably not getting what they need out of those swim sessions.